Britain, the United States, and Japan have all gone through periods of enormously rapid industrial growth, and many of them in the course of that have ended up leaving a legacy of pollution that they have subsequently needed to clean up. China has a different situation. It's going through an industrial revolution of its own, which in some ways is happening in a more compressed time frame than those other great powers in history. But it's also got pollution on a scale that those other great powers never quite experienced. There are hundreds of thousands of people in China who are dying every year from pollution-related diseases. The only larger cause of death in China now than pollution-related diseases is smoking.
16 of the 25 most polluted cities in the world are in China. And in the area of water pollution, they're having problems in a lot of areas with people not having access to safe drinking water. That's leading to problems with health.
Now you also have China confronting a situation where pollution is not purely a domestic issue, it's an international issue. China last year, at least according to one study, has become the largest emitter of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, surpassing the United States.
Green GDP is really an attempt to arrive at a true cost of economic growth by not just looking at the straight GDP figure, but calculating in some of the costs of environmental pollution and environmental degradation and resource use. Chinese experts and international experts have realized there hasn't been enough focus on the environmental cost of that growth. Everyone knows that pollution has been very serious, but if you can calculate it into the GDP, that really gives people a clearer picture of what you're really achieving. You know, if you actually have a lot of damage to your own environment and you're losing a lot of resources, are you really growing at the amount that you think you're growing?
The first year's report was officially released publicly. After that report was published, we know from some people involved in the effort that provincial leaders, among others, felt that this project was a threat to them, especially to some of those in provinces that have the most heavy industry, who saw their reported growth rates reduced the most. And a lot of them protested this effort.
Officials in local areas, they're not going to like the idea of a green GDP, because if they continue to do what they're doing, the GDP figures will go down. There are people who probably prefer the party to go on as usual and to be able to continue to build and make as much money as possible. And so those people have been resistant. Some people in the local governments have been resistant to green GDP.
There became more and more opponents within the system, and eventually they decided to strip this whole green GDP effort of its official status. The official explanation for discontinuing the Green GDP project as an official project was that the science behind it is immature. The real explanation, I think, is that it largely became a political matter. To date, provincial leaders are not being promoted or punished based on what they do or don't do to protect the environment, but they are being promoted or punished based on the degree to which they're able to create wealth, to which they're able to ensure social stability and to create jobs. So the incentives for provincial leaders still tend to favor economic growth over environmental protection. Economic growth is as close to China comes as having a state religion. One of the prices of the Deng Xiaoping era is that the party has in some ways really become fixated on economic growth. The whole authoritarian political system is geared toward producing not just high economic growth, but in some ways almost ever higher rates of economic growth.
The way China's government has been set up over the last 30 years, really GDP is king. If you can make the GDP grow in your area, that leads to promotions. It leads to obviously more taxes because the businesses are growing.
The Chinese leadership is clearly focused on the pollution problem and on trying to develop a more environmentally sensitive economic and political model. And they currently have put in place some quite ambitious targets for reducing emissions of various pollutants and also for reducing the amount of energy that's required to produce each dollar of GDP. They're actually quite hard targets, hard in terms of fixed, and they're very difficult to meet. And so far they've been unable to meet them. But the fact that they've adopted them and tried to sort of push them through is, I think, testament to the fact that they're serious. But I think serious questions still remain as to, first of all, whether they're going to be able to achieve those targets. Secondly, whether the targets will thoroughly change the approach to managing the economy, or whether people will figure out how to comply with the targets without really changing their underlying behavior.